Hi there, welcome back to the Serviam Podcast. I am Lucy Steigerwald, and today in the internet studio we have William C. Anderson. Welcome, William. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Little bio of William. He's a writer and activist from Birmingham, Alabama. His work has appeared in The Guardian, MTV, British Journal of Photography, Logic's Magazine, and Prism, where he's a monthly columnist. He's the author of The Nation on No Map from AK Press and the co-author of As Black as Resistance. He's also the co-founder of Offshoot Journal and provides creative direction as a product of the Black Autonomy Podcast. His writings have also been included in the anthologies Who Do You Serve, Who Do You Protect from Haymarket, and No Selves to Defend, Mariame Kaba, who a couple years ago we had on here, and she was a very cool guest to have. Well, we like to start, I guess, with just if I came up and asked, what are your politics? How do you identify? What would you tell me?
If you asked me what my politics were, I would just say I'm a Black radical. I think that for me at this point in my life, I try very hard to avoid coming off as an ideologue of any sort. I'm not dogmatic. I am not super sectarian. I have principles, I have values, and I have politics that have lines that I do or don't cross. And um, I try to keep an open mind. And primarily, I think that if someone who needed a little bit more definition were to ask me to be a little bit more specific, I tell them that if I was describing myself and they were listening, they'd probably say, "Well, you sound like an anarcho-communist." So I think that if I had to put a label, I would say it probably comes closest to anarchist communism. But I, I I don't feel too attached to any labels these days.
That works. Um, it is funny that to me, Black radical and anarcho communist both might scare your average normie, shall we say, but then the rest of what you say is, so moderate and centrist of you. But have you changed at all over the years? Did you have any kind of journey? And also kind of who influenced you along your path?
Yeah, it's definitely been a journey. I mean, like most people, I uh, came across a lot of different ideas and um, sets of politics and approaches in my life. I was raised in sort of a um, pretty Black nationalist household with liberal leanings and elements of sort of state socialist thinking. And that was primarily my upbringing, was sort of this mixture of some of those elements. And for me, I just got to a place where I kept questioning and questioning. I went through a lot of different phases. I ultimately sort of leaned into a state socialist politic pretty early on in my teens.
Mm.
Um, that's to say that I was embracing a more traditional kind of approach to thinking about socialism, or at least the more orthodox statist approach, that is, which is, I thought that Black people should unite as a nation and come together and have a more sort of homogenous socialist state that we model after other revolutions and post-colonial independence and so on and so forth. But I started just seeing a lot of issues within not only some of the histories that I felt romantically about, but I started seeing issues with some of the people who I think had um, come to influence me in different ways in terms of the historical figures. So when I saw those contradictions, when I saw those issues arising, I started to push back a little bit. Also, kind of being in those spaces, particularly in like more traditional Orthodox Marxist Leninist, Maoist spaces, I just saw a lot of things that what they felt like limitations to me, and I never wanted to enter into any space that called itself revolutionary, but was actually very limiting. So, with that being the case, I just kept pushing and pushing, and ultimately was able to come across different thinkers, different radicals and revolutionaries, and they led me to ask different questions. Some of those people were anarchists. Some of them were autonomous Marxists, or libertarian Marxists,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and some of them were just folks who maybe don't fall under any particular type of category. They were just people who were questioning. And based off of the things I started taking in, I started exploring anarchism. um, I think I've probably said before in different places that Rudolf Rocker was the first anarchist I ever really read from the in the classical sense, and ultimately I ended up reading and meeting and then reading Lorenzo Kom'boa-Ervin, and he definitely made anarchism clearer to me than anyone ever had. And when I started exploring anarchism more deeply, I said, this makes a lot of sense to me. This is something that I'm going to have to sit with. And I had to go through a lot of questions and struggles internally with my realization that anarchism was appealing to me, because it felt hard for me to admit that to myself at the time.
Why was
Just
that?
I just had hangups. I just
Mm-hmm.
had hangups. It's the fact that anarchism is maligned, it's misrepresented, it's misdefined, it's a misnomer. It it is very it's very hard to compare it to what is happening now. Things are very different now than back then. So back then, when I was younger, um, and I don't mean to make myself sound super old, but when I was when I was a teen, anarchism, it was much harder to learn about Black anarchists and find materials from Black anarchists. So it just came off as very, very white,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't relate to a lot of the white anarchists who I encountered, and their ways of appealing to me just didn't always land, because they couldn't connect with me uh, around issues that I was confronting related to race. So I had to um, meet someone who could talk to me about race as it related to anarchism and to stateless socialism and to thinking about things like nationhood and so on and so forth. And that was when I was able to let some of those hangups go.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about what do you think is distinctive about Black anarchism? I mean,
Yeah, Black anarchism is a distinct um, movement, in the sense that it gathers a lot of the um, various aspects of classical European anarchism, and it takes them, I believe, further by also mixing in the experiences of people who were in the civil rights movement, who were descended from enslaved African people, who were in the Black Power movement, who had taken part in the feminist movement, and so on and so forth, and a lot of the revolutionary aspects of the 60s and 70s and so forth. It takes those experiences and those stories of those people, and it's able to extend classical anarchism um, without necessarily trying to reform or revise the things that it may have not been able to speak to in terms of race, in terms of gender, in terms of different questions that would come later. So it is also a movement that breaks away from uh, that which many of the people came out of. So when I say the civil rights movement, when I say the Black Power movement, despite the fact that those Black anarchist thinkers in this cohort that we primarily identify as Black anarchism, despite the fact that they had come out of those movements, they were able to take lessons and practices and understandings from them while still seeing the limitations of those movements and the shortcomings that they had encountered. And therefore, they take a really wide net of understanding and cast it over the entirety of the Black radical tradition. So that's to say, they're looking at Marxist Leninism, they're looking at Maoism, they're looking at Stalinism, they're looking at the civil rights movement, they're looking at feminism, they're looking at everything that comes before, all of their influences, all the things that they once were or were a part of, and they're taking that, taking the good from it that they can draw from, and putting it towards an anarchist analysis that I feel is really comprehensive, because they're not operating from a place of orthodoxy. They're actually arguing for something new, and they really shaped some new theory and some new perspectives and revolutionary praxis that is incredibly important for us right now.
Do you think there is a tendency, I don't know if it's particularly among Black radicalism, to kind of look to a nation state as a solution? I know that's one tendency, but I don't know if you've like countering that with the idea that the nation state is a problem and not the solution to racism and oppression.
Yeah, I think that there is definitely a tendency to look at the nation and nation building as a solution. That's a tradition
Hmm.
within many sectors of Black radicalism. So, when you look back to people like Marcus Garvey, when you look back to the different aspects of the Black involvement in the communist movement, and throughout the more statist aspects of the Black radical tradition, it's a common sort of theme. And thinking about Black people as an internal colony, it makes sense why many people would be drawn to that sort of thinking.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, for me personally, and for many of the folks who I'm influenced by in the traditions of Black anarchism that come later, yes, the nation state becomes a problem, not a solution, in the sense that uh, you come to understand that this is ultimately another argument for reformism.
Hmm.
That is to say, we're going to try to make the state something that works for us and not against us. But the state is not ours. There's no iteration of the current modern nation state as we know it that has been shaped and crafted uh, completely outside of the context of colonialism and slavery, as well as capitalism. And when we admit those sorts of things, then you have to say, how would we make something that has our oppression built into it work for us? How would we do that? So that's the contradiction there, and that's part of what's being overcome.
Would you consider, I mean, just now, even just thinking about what I know about the Black Panthers, and there's a lot of elements that seem kind of anarchist in action, if not in stated ideology. I don't know if that makes sense. Um, if that's like a tradition that maybe people don't think of them in terms of anarchism, but again,
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the Black Panther Party, I think one of the important things for us to understand is that the Black Panther Party was a multi chapter organization with different people who had different ideas and different beliefs. There were splits, there were departures within the party, there was arguments. So when you look at former members like Ashanti Alston, like Lorenzo Kom'boa-Ervin, like Kuwesi Balagoon, these folks who ended up becoming the part of this cohort of Black anarchists, um, they look back, I think, endearingly, and also they look back with a lot of criticism about a lot of the aspects of things that were happening within the party, especially as it relates to things like coercive hierarchy and
mhm,
unilateral decision making. Um, but even while that was happening, you have something like intercommunalism, which is the theory of the survival programs that were largely being carried out by Black women in the party. And the way that Huey P. Newton theorizes intercommunalism is very interesting because there's a ton of anarchistic elements in the way he theorizes it, as well as his criticism of dogma and of this sort of static approach to Marxism and Marxist Leninism. Um, those are things that speak to the complexity of the party. So there is a lot that can be drawn from there. There is a lot that can be appreciated about it. But even though it's not explicitly anarchist in name, um, it doesn't mean that it can't contribute to what Black anarchism becomes following the dissolution of the party. And I think that that kind of speaks to my earlier point about what Black anarchism is. Even though those former Panthers are like, this was wrong with the party, that was wrong with the party, this was wrong, this was wrong, they're still looking at it and they say, oh, but this was right and this was good and we learned this and we did this and we were able to achieve that. And so when you take that sort of praxis of being able to see the limitations and the contradictions, but also being able to recognize what was empowering and what was beneficial, that's how you have a truly radical and revolutionary movement, because you are not just engaging things in this very sectarian and limiting way where if it's not a part of your clique or your club, then it can't be used at all. It's looking at the whole picture of history and looking at all of the precedents that were set and building on them to have a real praxis so that you can go forward with understanding of current conditions rather than being stuck in the past.
do you think is there anything sort of tangible that, like, I don't want you to have to tell white people how to be more useful, but anarchism seen as a generally white movement, is there something that would make that a little less so, that you can think of, beside, I mean,
I think right now the most important thing for folks to be doing is a lot of political education work.
mm,
We're in a very anti-intellectual era, and people are even amongst radicals, people are very anti-intellectual. They're very anti-reading. They're very anti-education, and so I think that the task at hand for all of us, no matter what our racial identification is to be doing a lot of hefty political education work and thinking beyond just the ways we might have typically approached that. You know, in many ways, the world is changing in terms of how we consume media and information. Thinking about creative, new, and innovative ways to reach people and educate people towards revolutionary and radical praxis. I think that that's one of the most important things. And so, with that being the case, if we're talking about that sort of emphasis, if folks want to help um, explain and illustrate the the complexities and the diversity of of anarchism and the broader socialist movement, the anti-state aspects of the socialist movement. If folks want to do that and want to take that up, one, they need to make sure that they're doing the educational work that is necessary in their own selves, in their own spaces, their own friend groups, families, and what have you, and understand and learn the complexity, be able to talk about it with people, and then try to disseminate and make that widely available. That's a lot of the work that I'm trying to do myself right now. We just released a zine at Offshoot Journal, and it's anarchism versus socialism, kind of like this nonsensical question being explained. Like, why are people always pitting these two things against each other when anarchism comes out of the socialist movement? And the reason that we created that zine is because we hear so many folks saying, I'm not a socialist, I'm an anarchist, or I'm not a anarchist, I'm a socialist. And it was just kind of like, oh, people don't know that this history is all connected, and that
Mm-hmm.
that this is a departure from statist socialism. It's not just a complete denunciation of socialism as a whole. So I think that things like that, making interventions, are really important, and that there's a huge intervention that needs to be made. This is a huge aspect of my work as well, in terms of illustrating and explaining to people not just the Black anarchist history, but the history of anarchism in Mexico, the history of anarchism in Brazil, the history of anarchism in Korea, in Japan, on the African continent, the history of anarchism the world over, and letting people know that there have been a lot of folks who have taken this up, have put it into practice and experimented in ways that get looked over. Now, I say all of that, and I think it's important to also say that doing that work should not become a effort to simply uh, coax people into thinking that they should be this or be that just because there are people who share a race with them that identify it that way. Because I have seen this thing that happens particularly with white anarchists, where they sort of use my work or other people's work, and they'll say, well, you don't know anything about anarchism. There's Black anarchists. You need to read da 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 da, and they'll name off me and a few other people. And it's very tokenizing and
Mm-hmm.
objectifying. It's like, I don't want you to ever treat my work or somebody else's work as if it's a token for you to lob at some person who's arguing with you about Stalin. That's not the purpose here. The purpose is for us to understand that there's history that can inform us and influence us now. It's not for us to be diversity, equity, and inclusion within white anarchism. We're not here to be the tokens of the anarchist movement. We have our own ideas that differentiate from each other, despite the fact we're all Black people, and there's complexity that should be offered there too.
Now I'm not sure if I should move on to your recent article about DEI at Prism. Um, the headline being DEI and the Limits of Multicultural Consumerism. And I want to read a quote near the end of the piece that you wrote, which is, "We can't keep running to seek out safety in political representation, the nation state, corporations, and capital instead of ourselves." I quite like that. And I think that's a great refutation of, well, I mean, that everything depends on either woke capitalism or not. And I don't know how you feel about sort of the backlash now against the rainbow capitalism, the Black Lives Matter support on every sort of random corporation. Um, I don't know if you see any value in that at all, or whether it's just troubling to see it go away in that has an ominous, subtext.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to these efforts to seek inclusion, that it's always a question of what we're ultimately trying to work towards.
Hmm.
Are we trying to be liberatory, or are we trying to have a seat at the table that currently exists? And when it comes to representation, because a lot of conversations that get framed under the banner of, quote unquote identity politics, which I think is a bit carelessly used. I think a lot of times what we need to be talking about is representative governance,
Hmm.
because representation is the problem that we encounter where lots of people feel that what is going to make their lives better is having someone or something that represents them, even if it's oppressive. And so in the in terms of politics, in terms of the two-party system in the United States, there is a huge limitation when it comes to the public seeing their only way of approaching the question of how to better their lives as voting for a politician to represent them at the local level, at the state level, at the national level. And what ends up happening is they become completely divorced and separated from their own autonomy, their own self determination, and their own will to fight, because they've then taken it and they've exported it to a representative.
Hmm.
It's completely disempowering. And it is one of the most limiting and disempowering ways that you can engage politics. So when we're thinking about, these attacks on things like DEI, uh, on critical race theory, and so on and so forth, what is ultimately happening is there is a stripping away where the powers that be are ultimately admitting, and they're making it clear to people that we never wanted you to be included in the first place. We didn't want to give you these concessions. We didn't want to put up Black Lives Matter signs. We didn't want to do any of this. What we wanted to do was get you to calm down and appease you temporarily. We wanted to do counter revolutionary work to suppress your rage and make you feel as if we appeased you enough just for you to back off of taking stronger actions. And that's what this ultimately all boils down to. So it's not surprising, but it is a moment where people have to see that if we remain stuck in this pattern and in this hamster wheel of saying, just include us, just give us a spot, instead of demanding autonomy, instead of pushing for our self determination and shaping the world that we want for ourselves, that we're going to constantly be from operating from a place of loss, because one is about just trying to have a piece, just trying to have some crumbs, and the other is about having enough or more than enough to sustain yourself in the way that you would like to be sustained and that you need to be sustained as a community, as a collective, as people. And the fact of the matter is, with the world looking the way that it looks right now, with the things that we are facing in terms of climate, it's either this or possibly lose everything.
Yeah. Um, Do you see, I guess I was imagining more sort of like, again, like the Black Lives Matter support for every random corporation for about 2 years there. But looking at right now, um, examples like trying to remove trans people from the military. And I used to initially think, should I do I care about this when the military is bad? And I've had trans people say, well, and trans radicals even say, well, it's more about they're trying to remove trans people from all spheres, including ones that aren't a very good institution at all. I feel like these sort of issues might apply more. I mean, I don't know if in 1946, you would have been thinking, should we should we waste our efforts on desegregating the armed forces, or is that sort of a waste of people power? I don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
there's like harm reduction now, and then there's what you say, which is what sort of the long term dream. But in the meantime, I don't know.
yeah. I mean, that's a good point that you're making, and ultimately, I think that it crosses so many things, because when you look at what's happening with this sort of erasure of different marginalized people's contributions to building up and supporting what we know as the United States, whether it's militarily, whether it's in terms of education, in terms of technology, or whatever the contributions may be. A lot of people are reasonably proud of their histories of contributing to what has been touted as the most powerful country, the most innovative, the most free country in the world. It makes sense
Hmm.
that people would be proud to say, oh, well, my grandfather fought in this war and he got these medals. I was the first person to do this. My people had someone from our group that was the first person to do this in the United States and set this record. And it makes sense why people would see something to be proud of in that, again, representation. I think, though, what we are challenged and tasked with doing is talking about the fact that this really naked fascistic moment that we're in is not a departure from everything that preceded it. It's the natural conclusion. So just because your people, your group, your folks, whatever the case may be, were able to contribute to the things that this country has boasted about, it does not mean that this country has been in the right or
Hmm.
that it has been good. We have to see the United States for what it is and talk about what people have felt that they should do to try to make their lives better, what people felt they should contribute to try to represent the communities and the people that they come from to the best of their ability. That's completely. I think that that's a completely reasonable conversation to have. But then we do have to be honest about the fact of the matter also that we're not just fighting to be able to, again, have representation within empire, within imperialism, within capitalism. These are the things that are destroying the planet. If people came before us and they felt like that was the best way for them to try to prove themselves, on a case by case basis, maybe we might be able to see at different eras and different points in times where some people may have felt like that was their best option. But am I in 2025 going to be sitting up here arguing for trans people's participation in the US military? Absolutely not. And I'm not going to try to defend any situation where anything that has to do with this empire, which is currently enabling a genocide in Gaza, I'm not going to do anything to defend anything that has to do with the U.S. military or the United States and its horrors and atrocities around the world, just purely based on representation and hoping that some of us will be treated better if we just have access to inclusion. That doesn't make sense to me. I think that that's actually counter revolutionary and counterproductive.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I do wonder. You say this is the naked fascism, and I do think kind of and like the plausible deniability has come off, like the certain clothing has come off, and it's a little more obvious than it once was. But I'm wondering if you're surprised at all by sort of the shape that it's taken under Trump. I mean, I expected a bunch of people claiming that a tepid corporate DEI thing was somehow as dire as Jim Crow, some absurd false equivalency, but instead we're getting the removal of page after page about Harriet Tubman, Navajo code talkers, um, and it's trickling down to corporations who aren't technically being forced. There was apparently some Major League Baseball email celebrating Jackie Robinson for some reason because his blackness was not mentioned. It was disturbing and almost hilarious, but I'm surprised by kind of the form that's taken, like just the removal of certain words and certain people.
Yeah, I think that it's that there's layers to it for me. I've been anticipating this moment for a long time, especially in my work. You know, the first book that I co-authored with Zoe Samudzi, As Black as Resistance, was born out of an essay called The Anarchism of Blackness. And in that essay, what we were arguing was that Black people needed to explore anarchism for a number of reasons. And one of the reasons was because we were witnessing a rapidly bolstered fascism approaching us that was going to make it clear that trying to reform the state was not the way that we needed to go. And we were going to be put in positions where this sort of forced abandonment was putting us in a position that demanded of us to organize outside of the state anyway. That anticipation of what was coming was also something that guided me deeper into the work that I've been doing recently. So it's all been for me, at least to various extents throughout, the work I've been doing over the last almost 10 years. It's all been uh, varying degrees of recognizing that this moment was coming.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, to be in it, I can say there are a lot of things I look and I say, yeah, I expected that. And there are a
Yeah.
lot of things I say, oh, I didn't expect that. I didn't see that coming. I feel confident about my ability, in some regards, to recognize some of the things that are happening now to have anticipated them. But yeah, it looks different. It sounds different, in several regards as well, and that includes this sort of odd, multicultural, fascistic appearance of seeing people with black faces openly supporting this. And you say, how can you do that? How can this happen? This doesn't make any sense. But then when you go back when you look at history and pay attention closely, it's not unprecedented. And, in terms of some of the things I tried to point out in my last book, The Nation on No Map, this is why I talk about things like Marcus Garvey saying that he invented fascism and that Mussolini got it from him. Marcus Garvey met with the Ku Klux Klan. You look at different aspects of, um, Black nationalist history, and there are multiple occasions where people met, collaborated with, and expressed admiration for white supremacists and for
Mm-hmm.
fascists. So it's not unprecedented. It's not unprecedented. And I think that that's one of the reasons we have to pay really close attention and study so that we can see this is actually not as new as we might think it is, but the people, the powers that currently we have in front of us may just have different names, but might be saying some things that have been said before in some way, shape, or form.
Hmm. Um, I didn't know. I know a little bit about kind of the talks between ideas of black separatism and some of the KKK. I don't know. I think I've known about a less troubling version of kind of what you said, but I don't know if I do think today you will see I don't know. I haven't checked on like Richard fucking Spencer in a while. But people like that would often try to pull unconvincingly, well, I just want every race to have their own nation. And coming from someone like that, it's particularly unconvincing, but there's still this sort of strange attempt at a compromise where it's like, well, you just, it's the ultimate segregation, but like we'll all be kept to ourselves in our nice, cozy, ethnic compounds. And I don't know if you see, is there a flaw in kind of any type of black separatism? Like, is that sort of an inherent end result of that idea, or is there a way to make that sort of not toxic and not potentially, you know?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I can say is that there is no group of people on this planet that are inherently righteous, that are naturally virtuous and good. And I think that unfortunately, one of the byproducts of oppression, at least as we know it in the current modern era, is that oppression, especially egregious, horrific, tyrannical oppression, genocidal oppression, oftentimes makes people feel as if they have experienced something so dire, so bad, that they have developed a righteousness that might make them, as Paul Gilroy says, um, essentially innocent. And what I'm trying to say here is sometimes we can go through things that are so bad and that are so horrible that we start believing that all of our actions are justified.
Hmm.
You want to know who the best example I think to bring this up about right now is? The state of Israel.
I was thinking that, yeah.
So when you look at Israel and the weaponization of the Holocaust, of the Jewish Holocaust, it is absolutely, positively a perfect example of what I'm talking about. The weaponization of anti Semitism. Anti Semitism is real.
Hmm.
Anti Semitism has deep, deep, deep roots throughout world history, but it is completely being destroyed by people who feel that Zionism is ultimately what should represent all Jewish interests. And not even, and actually, I won't even say all Jewish interests, because that's not to include all Jewish people. They're really talking about the people that they feel are suitable for understandings of what Jewishness is. So it's not like Zionism is exactly inclusive and non-discriminating.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, for Zionists, the way that they use anti-Semitism, the way that they use um, uh, their own mythologies and their own religious superiorities and their own zealotry to justify all of the violence against the Palestinian people, all of the violence against uh, the Arab world, and so on and so forth, and the whole globe, really. I mean, just when we look at like what the state of Israel has been involved in just around the entire planet in terms of all sorts of um, unspeakable crimes against people and countries, communities, ethnicities, and so on and so forth, then it makes it clear that there is a huge warning for us. There's a huge warning. And that warning is, just because we have experienced grave and horrible and terrible acts of oppression and violence and genocide, it does not then give us a pass to go and do anything we want, even if we say we're doing that in the preservation of our people, of our group, of our society, whatever the case may be. And I try to make that point in my book, in The Nation on No Map, by pointing to, and I just briefly mentioned this, by pointing to the creation of Liberia on the
Right.
African continent, with the American Colonization Society essentially deporting and shipping formerly enslaved Black people from the United States to Africa, and forcing the creation of the state of Liberia at the expense of Native people who were there. And it's a really complicated and ugly situation, because there was also some engagement with the slave trade in that region as well. And I'm not saying that it wasn't messy, but what I am saying is, when you look at what these people who were formerly enslaved did in the creation of Liberia, the creation of systems of indenture and servitude and slavery, just as they were formerly to be formerly enslaved, and to go into engage in these ways that you would think many folks would actually want to completely separate from. It tells you that it can turn around and happen just like that. It's just a matter of time, if you haven't done the work of saying, I want to actually create a different world. You can fall victim and be susceptible to actually just creating a repetition or a recreation of the very things that could have harmed you. So I think when we look at Israel, when we look at the history with Liberia, and when we look at a number of other examples throughout history, there's a huge warning, and we're supposed to know, again, that we are not essentially innocent as people just because we have experienced oppression.
That makes sense. Can you talk a little bit about your even more recent Prism piece, which you talked about choosing fights against fascism wisely, and also maybe sort of talk about like um, what mistakes anarchists and leftists made the first time, if any, like are picking the wrong battles or the wrong framing or what have you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when it comes to choosing our fights wisely, I wrote one of my recent columns is about focusing on uh, the battles that are most important rather than those that are maybe symbolic or a waste of our time.
Mhm.
And I really wrote that piece because there is there's a problem, I think, with a lot of posturing when it comes to different factions of the left. And I feel like people get caught up in, especially online, people get caught up in these like sort of predictable, repetitive fights. Um, it's pretty annoying to me to see it, because I think that we could be putting our energy towards things like housing people, feeding people, building collective power to actually pose a serious threat and a counter to all of the violence that we're up against. And so it frustrates me to see these different sects of leftists, these different groups getting pulled into these really kind of like pointless beefs. It's kind of like, what does that do for anybody? And I think that that's one of the things I'm asking in that essay. I'm saying, who if you're in this conflict, this serious conflict online or wherever over Kronstadt or or something that happened in the Russian Revolution or what took place in Spain, or if that is like where your energy is like engaging in those sorts of arguments online or elsewhere over and over. I'm just asking, like, who's that feeding? Who is that housing? Who is that
Yeah.
helping? Like, you can just go create a zine and then just put it out there. You see somebody online say something wrong and bad, just post a link to your zine and say, "Hey, here's some correct information with sources." You don't need to be going back and forth with some
Yeah.
clown online about that type of shit.
Yeah.
Like, that's really all I'm saying is like we see these things that are just like that's just a waste of your energy and it's pointless. So many folks get pulled into reacting to some bullshit, and I'm just and it's not just online stuff. I mean, it could even be, in terms of party politics. It's like, create what you need to correct what you know is going to be, repeating out here in the world. So if you know that there's folks who are going to be saying, the Democratic Party is our best way forward, again, do that political education work, create resources for people to show why that's not true, but don't lose sight of what we should be doing that's actually going to sustain people, that's actually going to make people safe, that's going to make us able to defend ourselves, make us able to actually be a real threat. And I think that we lose sight of the fact that we have to be a threat. And we're not threatening when we're engaged in petty ideological conflicts, as the great Martin Sostre would call them, with these sorts of armchair revolutionaries. That's not the point of all of this.
I think some of the online snipers are probably thinking they are making the grand political education with the back and forth beefing on the internet. At least they tell themselves that, probably.
They
Also,
they might think that. I mean, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just want to also put out there that, like, if you're using a site like Twitter that is completely operated and controlled by a white supremacist tech fascist, a lot of times these folks may not even know who they're arguing with.
yeah,
So, it's like, there has to be some sort of like uh, way that we start rethinking about, like, even the spaces that we're having these debates and conversations in. Because, if you're doing it on Twitter, you're doing it at a Klan rally, basically, and I'm not going to be fighting for a stage at a Klan rally.
yeah. I mean, most people would know not to go to like Stormfront message boards and spend all their time.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
and at this point, yeah, I don't know why anybody's on Twitter anymore. It's basically a state entity as well as being chock full of racist. I mean,
You're
um,
right. You're right. You're absolutely right.
I do think it's funny though talking about the many leftist fights, but how I think a lot of the right still imagines this terrifying monolith of the left that is a moderate Democrat all the way to the most radical Antifa in the world, and that they all agree and they're all marching against the right, I think.
I actually don't even know if a lot of the right. I mean, when I pay attention to what white supremacists are saying,
Yeah.
and I don't actually think that all of them even think of like anarchists and uh, you know any other factions of leftists. I don't even think a lot of them identify. Um, and maybe I should be more specific. I don't think a lot of them identify the actual leftist factions as leftists. I
Mhm.
know that some of them maybe more towards the sort of MAGA Tea Party esque types. A lot of them, when they say the left and they think of like quote unquote big scary communism, they're thinking of like AOC or
Yeah,
like
that's that's true.
Democrats, and like they don't really know about like anarchist groups or like state socialist group. Like they just know about like maybe at best DSA or something.
I
So
do think the left is much more aware of the nuances of the right than vice versa.
absolutely, absolutely.
You could probably prove that in court if you wanted to. It's not just a bias. I think they really do find it worthy of paying attention and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, I would like to backtrack just a trifle because I wanted to poke at you a little bit about how Marxism influences your anarchism at all, and kind of how you see it, where it is in relation to anarchism as a whole.
That's a fun question. You're starting to ask me some exciting fun questions. It's great because I appreciate getting to answer different questions. I feel like I repeat myself a lot. So Marx is one of my favorite writers of all time. Um, I think uh, I think as a writer, if we're taking politics and who Marx is as a person and putting it to the side, I think in terms of prose, in terms of style, and in terms of ability, I think Marx is just like I think he's one of the greatest writers to exist in the last few hundred years.
Hmm.
Um, so I know that that's high praise,
It is, yeah.
and I'm just telling you that really I have a lot of respect for Marx's ability to communicate ideas. And I think that that is a huge reason that Marx has had the influence that he had on the world, and that he attracted so many people, even people who may have hated him and
Mhm.
disagreed with him, felt that he was worth arguing with for a reason, and that was because of his effectiveness. Um, however conniving he might have been at different times in his life. So Marx's influence on me, first and foremost, is as a good writer. I think he just was a good writer. But beyond that, the place that Marx begins to have influence in my life is, I think that obviously Marx's analysis when we think of capitalism is definitive because it has stood the test of time. There was so much that Marx got right about what capitalism was and what it was going to be over time, and that's just goes without kind of goes without saying. But when you also put that in conversation with a lot of the different places that Marx went in his lifetime, in terms of the people who he was influenced by and the people who he departed from, who he had in his circles. I think that he set an example to some extent of a level of curiosity and drive to try to address um, very serious questions that we still have in front of us in many ways. So I look at Marx's life as a testament to um, a practice that we can learn from in many ways. But I also again view it as a warning. And the
Okay.
reason I view it as a warning is because a lot of people told Marx, a lot of people told Marx, hey man, you know, you need to chill. Like you're doing a little bit too much. And, you know, I think foremost amongst those people would have been Proudhon,
Hmm.
and also thinking, of course, of Bakunin saying, yeah, there's going to be a state one day that's going to be the people's state of Marx, and there's going to be people abusing your ideas to do some really oppressive shit. And guess what? That happened. And it is still continuing to happen. And I
Hmm.
think that was right on the money. But, you know, Proudhon also told him in correspondence, Proudhon wrote a letter to Marx and said to him, you know, hey, I didn't, you know, get into all this just to recreate dogma and religiosity just in this, you know, quote unquote secular way. And I
Hmm.
think that that's what you're, you know, getting ready to do here. Um, and I don't think that you know, it's possible to say everything that Marx may have felt or thought at the end of his life. But I think that when you look at um, some of his later writings, I feel as if there's at least some acknowledgement, like, oh, this is maybe not what I wanted all the way. Especially when you look at writings like the Critique of the Gotha Program, where Marx is saying, you know, y'all are starting to take my ideas here and do some stuff. I didn't say nothing about that. I didn't say anything about this over here.
If he only knew.
Exactly, and it's gotten worse, right?
Hmm.
So I mean, there's a lot to learn from that, and I feel influenced by the story of Marx's life, as well as a lot of his intellectual contributions, and again, just his writing stylistically.
Looking at, America, because here I sit in America. I don't know if you see like the critique of looking at America is that we talk only about sort of racial tension and struggle and not class struggle, or we equate them as one and the same. I don't know if Marx can help you understand that, or if that kind of gets muddied by how America happened.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to race, Marx is not the guy I'm going to on that at all. So, I mean, I think Marx was very much a white man, and the sense that uh, he was, and maybe I should rephrase that. Marx was a white man of his time.
Hmm.
He was a white man who um, I think was able to see some things, but you know, very limited by his relationship to his whiteness. And so I would never really take up Marx as anybody to help with anything when it comes to race. I think obviously there's amazing, timeless contributions in terms of thinking about class, but yeah, the way that people have kind of tended to um, look at look at class as this overarching, all encompassing thing that erases every other aspect of identity, I think is extremely problematic. I think that that's been a huge limitation across all factions of the left, anarchists included.
You
Um,
get like a Bernie Sanders sort of middling, vaguely socialist types will sometimes sort of scold the left and say, identity politics are bad. Let's talk about the class stuff now, in a way that seems like sort of it's a false, pitting them against each other in a way that's sort of artificial, I think.
Yeah, and I think that that's yeah, it's just problematic. I would encourage people to go read the Combahee River Collective's statement about identity politics and look at how it centers class
Okay.
in many ways when they are talking about identity politics. And I mentioned earlier that I really feel. bothered by the way that that term is thrown around, particularly because a lot of times what I believe people are trying to talk about is representation.
Hmm.
And we should be talking about representation and representative governance. But when people sort of use identity politics in this really reductive and often misdefined way, it ends up being a conversation that is ultimately about uh, kind of chastising people for bringing up their identity in any way, shape, or
Yes.
form. And I'm like, no, people need to bring up their identity. We all face different things and different problems in our lives based on what our identity is and the politics we have related to our identity. We're supposed to talk about that. We
Hmm.
can't address a lot of shit if we do not talk about that. So, no, I'm not going to say, oh, only class matters. Identity is just a bunch of stuff that muddies the water. That's not true. That is not true at all. There are people who face multiple compounding complexities of oppression based on different identities that they have, whether that's related to gender, whether that's related to class, whether it's related to race, whether it's related to religion, to a number of things, may be the case. But we don't need to be erasing talking about anything that complicates our lives as human beings when it comes to how we show up and appear to other people in this world. The people at the top are quite conscious of identity and think about it all the time in terms of shaping their oppression and who they want to marginalize, who they want to make disposable, who they want to kill and exterminate. So us not talking about that on the receiving end seems pretty nonsensical in my opinion.
I mean, it also seems like not reality. I mean, like it's more tangible than people pretend. If and more obviously, I can see like I've heard, Barack Obama refer to being mistaken for a waiter at some things like that. And like, I'm not don't care for that guy, but like, do I believe that in his life at sort of a fancy person gathering, people were like, the black guy's the waiter? I mean, of course I do. Like,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
it's tangible. So to deny that seems rather not even just wrong, but just denying reality, which is the style of the time. So never
Yeah,
mind.
and I mean, I referenced that. I referenced an example in the Nation on No Map in terms of talking about blackness and citizenship.
Mm,
And I used Barack Obama. I'm like, this man was the president of the United States, and he spent the whole time saying, "I'm a citizen. Here's proof." They had to put his birth
yeah.
certificate on the website of the White House to say this man is a citizen because it was constantly up for question. How can you be a citizen? You're not this. You're so it's just it is definitely something that has to be discussed and talked about.
Hmm. I I'm trying to remember. You mentioned at least one of them, but I was going to ask about. Let's see if I can say the names: Lorenzo Kom'boa Ervin and JoNina Abron-Ervin.
Nina, yeah.
Um, I just who are they? And how they influenced you?
So Lorenzo Kom'boa-Ervin is the um, author of Anarchism and the Black Revolution. He's a former Black Panther. Was involved with SNCC.
Mm,
Was in the civil rights movement. Has a very deep history, but he's one of the founding thinkers in terms of, again, that group of people who I really think define contemporary Black anarchism, coming out of the Black Power movement, coming out of the civil rights movement. Lorenzo was incarcerated, and he was a political prisoner who was able to learn about anarchism from a man named Martin Sostre, who was another political prisoner who gave him a political education when they crossed paths during their incarceration. And it was just for a short time, but it changed the trajectory of Lorenzo's life. Lorenzo had a number of experiences that are just kind of breathtaking. I mean, he fled to Cuba and was detained there. Um, he had to ask a lot of questions about state socialism because of that detainment. He was detained in Czechoslovakia and East Germany. He had a lot of negative experiences
Yeah,
um, with being detained and oppressed by state socialist governments. I think led to a lot of questions in his life about um, his own politics at the time, because he was a Maoist, I believe,
sure,
when that was happening. Um, and this is something that was happening across a lot of aspects of a lot of sectors of the Black Power movement. Different people started having these uncomfortable situations, encounters, oppressive experiences, and started asking hard questions. And whether they were castigated or alienated for asking those questions is a different story. I think Lorenzo definitely was, and he took on a lot and bore a lot of the brunt of of being insulted, of being alienated, and being rejected for certain things in certain positions he took, that are now very clear why he took them. So he's a really fascinating person in terms of his personal history, um, and his book Anarchism and the Black Revolution is kind of the maybe one of the most definitive, if not the most definitive, text of Black anarchist writings. Um, it's a must read for anybody who hasn't checked it out. It really will help you kind of understand a lot of his politics and the politics of people who are influenced by him, myself included. Uh, and JoNina Ervin is Lorenzo's partner, and has an amazing story of her own. She was the last editor of the Black Panther Party newspaper, was actively involved in the party, as well as has really strong elements of womanist and feminist influences in her time in the Black Power movement and even following it. She's done a ton across the civil rights, Black Power, and post Black Power eras. Uh, they they both have done really amazing community organizing together. JoNina was also the editor of the Black Scholar at one point. She's also a an intellectual who has made enormous contributions, and she has a book called "Driven by the Movement" that's actually getting ready to come out in late 2025. And I had the honor of getting to write a foreword for that text that's being reissued. So I encourage people to check that out as well. That text is really an ethnographic sort of approach to collecting different stories of people who were involved in the Black Power movement and in the Civil Rights movement, and asking them kind of to reflect on what they learned, what they experienced, and she weaves it together in this really beautiful way. So they're just amazing people. They have a podcast together called the Black Autonomy Podcast. I produced that podcast, as you mentioned at the beginning of this program. And yeah, they're just phenomenal. They've taught me a lot. They are the ones who introduced me to Black anarchism, and I met them. Uh, I met them in Tennessee when I was much younger, and I was organizing and co-leading a workshop that was a gathering of Southern organizers at the time. I was doing a lot of organizing work. We had this conference, and we were talking about what we wanted to accomplish in different Southern states. And Lorenzo and JoNina had been invited to speak. I didn't know anything about them, but after I got done listening to them, I said I need to go read more about anarchism, and that was basically it.
nice. Yeah, I should check out both those, honestly,
Yeah.
both those books. I know we talked about having trying to fetch Lorenzo somehow for the podcast, but I think who knows someday.
Well, if you need help, let me know. So I'm always in touch with him. A lot of people reach out to me to get to Lorenzo. You wouldn't be the first, so
Hey, we like you too, though, so don't don't worry about that.
I appreciate it.
I was going to move on to a lightning round now, and the first one actually is a bit inspired by what you just said, because the first question is feminism or womanism.
Both,
Okay.
both, both. I mean, I've learned from both,
Hmm.
and um, I think that at a time like this, it's extremely important for men like myself to be engaged with both and beyond, particularly because of the just sort of like virulent misogyny and the manosphere stuff that's just like really prevalent out here and has really kind of infected uh, a lot of different factions of the left. Like you just hear like this really overt uh, gender violence aimed at, at women and at trans people, at queers. Like you just see so much of this stuff that you used to feel maybe at some point was a little bit more expected on the right, kind of has creeped into left circles, and it's just really disgusting, and it's masking itself in a number of ways, but it's also very overt at times. So I think that yeah, it's I think that it's just crucial to kind of do this work of making sure that we are talking about the importance of both of those categories and everything that they have to offer for us right now. But I also don't um, I also don't ever want to feel as if uh, there might not be more things that are developed beyond them that are also going to be important contributions for the future. So, yeah.
Um, Voting or not voting, or say voting or principled not voting, I guess.
um, you know, I I think that there's levels to that question.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think if you're talking about, say, a local matter where something might be voted on in terms of a local policy and how some resources are allocated, and folks are trying to organize for something in their city or jurisdiction to change so that some and some people get some more resources for this community that's being neglected, or some part of the environment is protected. I can absolutely see why folks would organize for voting around something like that. I think that when it comes to the national level, when it comes to the two-party system, I think that we have to talk about things like the electoral college. I think we have to talk about things like voter suppression, and how a lot of people's votes are actually just kind of symbolic.
Hmm.
And so I think that it depends is the answer on the circumstance. I am not a person who advocates for electoralism. I don't go out, as Lucy Parsons would have said. I'm not going out here vote begging. So uh, I tend to spend my time trying to do direct action and engaging with people in ways that do not feel disempowering, which all representation politics and representative democracy feels disempowering to me in the United States. But I completely understand if some people, especially in local situations, are doing things that engage in that way. I'm never going to tell people not to do that, but I'm going to always say don't make that the whole of your political activity when it is oftentimes extremely disempowering. There's a quote by Lorraine Hansberry that I often refer to, and she says that Black people need to be taking every action that's possible. She says Black people need to be voting, Black people need to be praying, Black people need to be doing sit ins, Black people need to be shooting their guns, and Black people need to be voting. So I tend to have that sort of approach in terms of my thinking. If it's not hurting or undermining revolutionary or radical activity, I think that I can be open minded about what some people are choosing to participate in.
I suppose some people might think it is sort of a tension release valve in a bad way. It is the substitute for. I'm sure it happens that way as well. I love, by the way, you calling representation um, disempowering, because I've never heard it put that way. And I think that's great, because people, I think some people would be completely baffled by that idea that it's the opposite of empowering.
Yeah, you're taking your will and you're handing it off to somebody else to represent you. That's definitely disempowering. If I know what I need, like if I know what I need, I can say what I need and speak for myself. That's direct democracy, right?
Yeah.
So it's like representative democracy is saying, "Oh, I'm not going to speak for myself. This person's going to go speak for me." And then when they get up there and they say, "Actually, I want to sell off all this person's rights and their power," then you look and you say, "Why'd you do that?" Well, you gave them permission to do that. You should have been advocating for you to directly speak for yourself rather than handing it off to a representative.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Um, Religion or atheism?
Everybody gets to pick that for themselves.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Uh, Video games, television, or movies?
For me
Mm-hmm.
personally, uh, oh man, actually, that's a interesting question because it's like at one point I would have said film,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I watch a lot of TV these days, and I have for some years now. So I think it's a tie between film and television. I watch a lot of both.
Okay.
So yeah, that's where I would go with that.
Um, Best concert you ever attended?
Oh, you can't ask me that. That's that's impossible. I mean, I love music.
Okay.
Um,
One of
and
the best? Can you give me that?
you know, it's hard for me to answer. I promise you, I'm trying my best to think right now, and I'm like becoming overwhelmed by all these amazing shows that are popping into my head. I will say this: I went and saw Sampha, I think last year, and it was one of the best concerts I had been to in a long time. I went and saw Black Coffee recently. That's the best concert I've been to this year. It was phenomenal. Um, but I mean, I've had the opportunity to see some really like legendary, amazing people too. I've seen like Kenny Garrett live, the jazz artist, and it was phenomenal. Like there's too many. There's too many. I would. That's like a whole other podcast. I could just talk about concerts on all day. Like there's too many people.
Too many. So that's all. That's good. That's a good life when you have too many choices there. Um,
Yeah.
First stop, if I gave you a time machine.
If you gave me a time machine, where would
Mm-hmm.
I go?
Mm-hmm.
Mm, that's always an interesting question for a person uh, that's black because it's like there's only so many places I want to go back in time. Um, but I mean, honestly, I would have. I actually wouldn't go that far. I would actually love to go and see some of the thriving black communities that once existed in this country that were destroyed by racism before they were destroyed. I would like to see what they were like. I would like to go and see what the Maroons were like, the rebel slave and indigenous communities that existed.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I'd stay there. I might just want
You
to
don't
catch a
have to
blend.
stay.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I would want to see, but I would definitely get back in that thing maybe after a couple days and head out.
That's fair. I have both serious history answers, but also speaking of concerts, there's a lot of concerts I'd stop by through all of history
Oh
myself.
yeah, see, that's a great point. I didn't even think about that. I would definitely go to some shows for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Um, what's your favorite conspiracy theory?
My favorite conspiracy theory? I'm not gonna lie to you, I hate conspiracy theories.
Okay.
I'm very anti-conspiracy theory. I think conspiracy theories are ways that people distract themselves from confronting the things that are happening in reality in front of them. So,
Fair
uh,
enough.
yeah, I'm very anti-conspiracy theory, and when people start saying conspiratorial things to me, I oftentimes get very aggravated because I'm like, well, here's Elon Musk over here doing this thing right in front of you, and what are you going to do about that? You're talking about aliens to me. There's a fascist standing right in front of you. What are you going to do about that? Nothing. Or you going to keep talking about the aliens? Okay.
I mean, Elon Musk's the shit right now is so blatant that it kind of glitches my brain sometimes. Like the
Yeah.
fucking the Sig Heil from Musk thing. My only
Yeah.
sympathy for denying that is how could anybody be doing that right now with in front of my own eyeballs.
Right. Right.
So sometimes the aliens are more fun. But I do appreciate that because conspiracy theories turn out to be a lot more damaging to human society than I had ever imagined a decade or so ago. So,
It's pretty bad right now. I mean, there's a lot of conspiratorial thinking right now. It's like it's really prevalent. Like you just see so many people every time something happens with like some celebrity, they're like, oh, Illuminati is controlling them, or oh, this, da, da, and I'm just kind of like, what? Like everything is not a conspiracy. Oh, yeah.
um, thoughts on a general strike in America? Should we do one?
I would absolutely love for people to organize and come together and do a general strike. But the thing is, I think that people have to understand that a general strike does not happen when a few people put some memes together on social media and say general strike on June the 3rd. That's not how a general strike takes a lot of organizing, and it takes a lot of coordination, and that takes time. It has to be built.
Mm-hmm.
You have to build towards the general strike. You don't just call for it and it happens. And so, yeah, it would be great, but people would have to be engaged and coordinating, and oftentimes put a lot of disagreements and a lot of issues aside to coordinate something so massive, especially in a country that's this big.
Yeah, that also makes sense. Worst U.S. president of all of them?
Can't you can't pick one.
So many wonderful choices.
I mean, honestly, at the top of my mind is Reagan,
Okay.
the Bushes, Andrew Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would honestly say that all of them collectively are the worst possible. I don't think that there's any U.S. It's not even think. I know that there is no U.S. president that I have fondness for or good feelings about ever.
That is also the correct answer. But you also mentioned some of my favorite non-favorites. Wilson is a particular favorite one that I hate.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Is there anything you changed your mind on in the last like year to 5 years? Anything sort of substantial about your politics or?
Hmm. Well, that's a deep question for me because I used to feel I used to feel certain things weren't capable of happening. And I've seen some things in recent years that have really shaken me to my core. And the thing that's coming to mind, I don't know if this answers the question right, but the thing that's coming to mind is when the pro Palestine protesters got up, when Biden was speaking at Emmanuel AME, the site of Dylan Roof's racist massacre of the parishioners who were there. And to see those protesters interrupt Biden, and to see some of the black elders in the church um, defend him and shush them and yell at them and rush them out, that shook me to my core. I'm
Yeah,
still I'm still reeling from it. Um, it's changed me, and it's changed my mind, but I'm not sure I can actually verbalize all the ways how yet. So I know that it has done something to me, but I'm still figuring out what. And it's kind of not surprising, because I was already thinking about a lot of the elements of what's at play in that scene that I'm describing, in terms of not ever thinking about myself or my people as flawless. Um, so yeah, that's just an example of a unfolding change that's still happening. And one day I'm gonna have to write about it. I'm gonna have to write about it, because that was a really disturbing and heartbreaking moment for me to witness personally, especially as somebody that grew up in the church.
that's interesting. I don't relate to expecting something from old people, I guess, the sort of, oh god, the boomers are at it again. So to be
Mhm.
disappointed in that way is, I'm trying to imagine it, but that's definitely not my experience. I've been disappointed preemptively for a very long time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that makes sense. I completely understand how you could say that, and um, I think that it was disappointing, but it wasn't so much. I think that it happened. I think that it was just like the audacity of it
Mm,
happening. I think it was like the audacity. It was like it was shameless. It was like a shameless situation, and it was kind of a moment of being like, oh, there's no shame, and that's kind of what I'm wrestling with.
yeah. Yeah, the response to that and the continued response in general. I'm not going to say like college students are right about everything, but they're usually on the right side of history, I would say. But as soon as the kids are like making trouble, suddenly it's. And actually, in one of those pieces of yours I was looking at, you mentioned sanitizing the civil rights movement. And I'm remembering now people being like, well, the civil rights movement never took over college buildings and things like
Yeah.
that. And you're just like, about that. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Here's we're almost at the end here. I can let you go soon if you got to do stuff. But how would
Yeah.
I get a cappuccino in your political utopia?
Well, you would just get one. There wouldn't be any buying or selling.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would love one day for there to be a moneyless world, currency being extinct. So you would just get it. If you wanted it, you needed it, you'd just get it.
I guess I should have asked you like Star Wars or Star Trek then if we're talking moneyless worlds.
I'm a Star Wars person for sure. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I know this is. I brought this up at the Anarchist Book Fair in Stockholm, and got kind of jumped on, because I said I like Star Wars over Star Trek, and the Trekkies got kind of mad, and they started talking about the science not being right and all, and I just was like, "Whoa!" Like this is it turned into almost a political debate. I was like, "This is intense." So yeah, but I'm a Star Wars person. I love um, I love everything. Well, that's not true. I like a lot of what Star Wars has been doing in recent years. I'm a big fan of The Mandalorian.
Hmm.
I love Andor. I loved Rogue One. Like, Yeah, the last trilogy though, I thought it was pretty bad. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I generally agree with that. Though our one producer, Chris, has been telling me I gotta watch Andor, and I still haven't. Maybe I should watch that next.
It's good. It's got a little anarchisty kind of thing going on with it. There's definitely some moments where I was like, "Is there something going on with the writer right in the writing room over there?" But yeah, it's a really good show.
Yeah, I mean, there's no. It's like so many questions. It's a false dichotomy. Star Wars and Star Trek are both pretty good, I would say. Ooh, there were some. Um, I guess if you have anything that you haven't mentioned in terms of um, like seminal books or even other types of media that like people should check out about kind of any of the stuff you've talked about, obviously Black anarchism related stuff, like what should people check out that we haven't talked about?
Um, well, definitely check out a lot of the titles with On Our Own Authority publisher, amazing independent publisher that is done some phenomenal work. Andrew Zonneveld, who has put out um, some great writings from the Caribbean intellectuals who were thinking outside of, thinking beyond the state, had anti-state politics, maybe were or were not um, anarchists or autonomists or whatever might be most fitting in terms of describing them and how they describe themselves. Just some really amazing titles from that publisher. They also publish Modibo Kadali's Pan African Social Ecology and Intimate Direct Democracy. He's a person who's been really influential in terms of his writings and his thoughts. I would recommend folks check out the collected writings that they put out of by Joseph Edwards. Um, and the work of Kamathi Muhammad and Organization and Spontaneity. Just some really rare titles over there, as well as UC Quayana, his works that have been republished. Just an amazing effort has been undertaken there with On Our Own Authority. So I always want to tell people to check out the selection, because I reference a lot of those works in my essays and draw from them quite a bit, because they represent kind of the bigger picture, broader um, sort of Black radical thought that I draw from, of people who generally were um, moving in this direction I'm trying to move in and move forward with. I would also tell people to check out, Offshoot Journal, which is the journal that I co-founded. Always doing a lot of work over there. There's going to be more coming soon. We've been in kind of a transitional period, and we're going to try to build out much more with the journal soon. So people be on the lookout for that, as well as the Black Autonomy Podcast, which I mentioned. And also check out martinsostry.com. That's where the Sostry Institute lives now. We have a ton of archival materials and amazing stuff there for people to learn from, play with. We have curriculums, like there's all types of stuff on that site. So people should go explore it. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right. And uh, specifically, where can people find you online and read your work? What's the easiest way to do that?
Always find me. I write a monthly column with Prism. You can always find me there, prismreports.org. The column is called Another Way Out. I write something every month. I always have something to say about the current events that are taking place. And so every idea that I've shared here today exists in some way, shape, or form in one of those columns, one of those essays that I've written for it. Um, I would also tell folks, that they can check me out on Blue Sky. I'm on there. My name's William C. Son. Um, and yeah, I used to be on Twitter, but again, like I said, that is a KKK rally. I had to make it, it no longer aligned with my personal politics or my values to be on there anymore. If people want to still use it, that's fine. But I deleted mine. Some people have been saying, "Where'd you go? I've been looking for you on Twitter," and it's gone, y'all. I deleted it. I'm not gonna get back on there. I don't trust it. So yeah, find me on Blue Sky. You can email me. I got my website, williamcanderson.info, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So the column, my website, and Blue Sky right now.
All right, that sounds pretty good. As always, people can find Non-Serviam on all sorts of social media, Blue Sky, Mastodon, allegedly Twitter. But so I can feel special. I also have abandoned Twitter. I need to actually delete my name because it is indeed a Klan rally and a state endorsed one at that. So who
Yes.
needs that?
None of us.
But thank you very much for being our guest today and dealing with my scheduling shenanigans. This has been very illuminating and also reminds me of all the stuff I got to read, including Marx for his quality of writing, which I can't say a lot of people say, but I'm certainly more intrigued after that.
Well, I can definitely send you some things, but I appreciate you and having me on. I appreciate the program, and it's been fun to get to answer some different types of questions. So I appreciate that.
That's good. That's what I try to do. All right. Talk to you soon. You're listening to the Non-Serviam Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, why not subscribe over on our YouTube channel or on your favorite podcast platform. You can also follow us across social media on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Mastodon. If you're extra interested in seeing this project continue, consider becoming a patron over at patreon.com. But if you can't contribute financially, we still like you a whole lot. And you can help us out just by liking and sharing this episode or any other one that catches your fancy. As always, shout out to our existing patrons. Your support helps us reach a larger audience and helps keep this project alive. Thanks so much.